There was a period in the history of tapestry around 1500s and 1600s in Alsace, Lorraine, Switzerland, Germany, where tapestry was quite a political weapon. Not party politics or that, but they made social comment, they made little digs. They were the public information. People couldn't read it, but they could see the picture, you know, in tapestry. And I've enjoyed that very much. There's a concern today that's popular today, the last 100 years, about tapestry being imitative and that it can copy paint very well. I agree that it does that rather too much, but it tends to copy painting. The values that the painter, the art museum, the art gallery seek. Tapestry tends to follow that, whereas I'm more interested in, I don't mind it going on a gallery wall, but it's more of a document, more of a social document than an artwork. It might become an artwork, but its purpose is just that little bit different. It has that history and it has that characteristic. The Middle Ages of tapestry, medieval times, they in fact used illuminated manuscripts often as the source material for the subject matter of the tapestry. And an odd thing about these manuscripts was that they're rather in the form of the strip cartoon like this is, or this is like the manuscripts. You may get the seasons depicted in an illustrated way, so you get 4 tapestries. You may get a story, The Hunt of the Unicorn, for instance, which by a series of tapestries tells a story in sequence. But you may even get the picture frame alongside each other. Tapestry called the Apocalypse, which hangs in France, a huge tapestry that is actually laid out exactly like the modern comic strip, frame after frame, in a couple of rows, and then the next tapestry. But this thing's many, many meters long, and maybe 3 or 4 meters high. But that's what initially attracted me to this here. You may recognize the character of the thing by a cartoonist called Reg Smythe and a character called Andy Capp, although he's not in here. He's a very elegant designer underneath the humour. And if you look at these frames closely, I'll cut them up and line them out one after another. And you see how the position in each frame, you read along it. You start at one edge and you grow. That's a characteristic of explaining about lettering and about weaving. One decision at a time and move on, one bit of information as you weave and move on. And I love that thing about tapestry. You don't quite know where you're going, you got a rough idea. And it's what attracted me about this. So the first thing I did was drop out Andy Capp and look at an actual size. He seemed redundant in that particular frame. And I drew up here just a working drawing. Thought about a number of questions in the drawing just by casual marks, and then went on to a more complete, harder drawing where I made a number of other decisions. None of them which were really final, because the real decision started right down at the bottom of the tapestry here. The first questions that start arising are, this is that much bigger, you know, that's a couple of inches. This is almost a meter high. So I don't want this plain blue. I'll get a bit more intensity and a bit more pattern into it. Having set that up, I then decided on the pattern of the coat. It was fun weaving these 2 ladies standing at a bar in an English pub drinking, because on the one hand I'm dealing with what really is fairly kind of I guess tasteless clothing. So I was looking for a kind of gaudy colour rather than a good colour. The kind of gaudy clothes that they might wear, but nicely coordinated, the greens and the yellows running right through. Even in the lettering, I've done a lot of lettering in tapestry, and it was interesting just to try and get the calligraphic language that is common to the cartoon or the drawing of our time. And that I guess that growth thing in the tapestry is probably one of the important things for me, that it's not a reproductive process, it's a whole creative process in itself. Much less like painting, in the sense that I had to start at the bottom and build up each part. Whereas in painting, you can paint all over and change it. You make decisions and you're stuck with them. And I kind of like that sentiment in work. The humour part, the tongue-in-cheek thing, I could be facetious. I think I'm being facetious when I say that tapestry really is a very ridiculous activity today. And there's some attraction, therefore, in doing ridiculous things with it. It's a kind of logic that it might be. But I think also, if you're aggressive in relationships with people, you don't get very far. Whereas if you can be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit wry, you find you can make point more readily, perhaps. And I think that's perhaps behind why I do it. But I like bad jokes, you know. The Sue Arnold tapestry. It has the same problems, actually, as the towel. The obvious way to weave it was from the bottom up, you might think. And that's the way I did weave it, but it would have been much more sensible to weave it upside down, because it is a replica of a newspaper cutting. I guess tapestry has often been political, social comment, as much as it has been purely a formal arrangement of form, shape and colour. And this is precisely that. It just seemed to be such a terrible bit of journalism by a very good writer. The Sunday morning reading was about potato chips and peanuts and crisps. So I decided to weave it, and the hard thing about weaving words like that is that you have the warp threads, in this case running vertically across the loom, and I had to plan out the alphabet to see what I could weave, how many warps each letter would take beforehand, do a couple of tests to work it out. And then I started weaving it. But I realized I was doing it the wrong way, because having woven the bottom line and then the next line, let's say I didn't have enough room in the second line, I would have to shift all the words. So I was weaving it the wrong way. Ideally, it would be easier to weave it upside down and weave the words in the sequence that they were written, so that if I didn't have enough room, I could move all the words subsequently along. But it worked out all right, but it could have been a problem. I like the brashness, the non-artistic nature of this. It's simply a statement about newspapers, because it's astonishing, the technology of printing today, and it's sometimes astonishing what's printed today. And tapestry has another characteristic, I think, that it's pretty indestructible. It hangs around for a long, long time, like hundreds of years, if the colors are reasonably fast at all. And the making permanent of something that was just, as destructible as last Sunday's newspaper was an intriguing thing to do, I think. I moved from Scotland 1977, 78 into the tropics, northern Australia and into New Guinea. And the idea of going back to Europe was quite difficult. It was very rewarding to be in countries where tomorrow was what the place was about rather than yesterday. I mean, I hated America when I first went there. Things, American values, American attitudes, American morals, American crassness. But I've grown to respect it over the years. the idea of going back to cold Europe, to the greyness. Hawaii was the one place to settle for these reasons, right? That it was warm, sunny, quiet. And strangely then, this was 1984, 85, I was intrigued to go to a place where I wasn't known. Tapestry is a very small world, a very small pool, and when you're a bigger fish in that pool, there's a lot of demands on you. So I was attracted to go there from New Guinea, where I had been involved in a very public way in the arts for a number of years, to go to be quite anonymous and quiet and put in these long hours in a pleasant islands. After 6 months, I was furious that nobody knew me. To be anonymous and unknown. I mean, I was offering tapestries for local exhibitions and getting rejected, right? And that was difficult to deal with. But the isolation in one sense is good there, because you simply go there to work and you put in these long hours. But we do find we need to get to the cities, get to the museums, get to the galleries, and deal with people, not just the arts, but deal with people in the more extreme levels that people survive or fail to survive in cities. Susan and I have lived together and worked together for about 5 years now. And it's certainly doing that. It's a very solitary activity, tapestry, but you put in the hours, you simply put in the hours. It's like, stamp collecting or research. You've just got hundreds of hours to put in. And working late into the night is a big part of my life. It always has been. To share that with someone else has been very special, that we're doing the same thing, but we work quite independently. We're side by side but doing our own work. It could be silent for long hours, but the interchange, when it does come, is right on what we're caring about. We both care passionately about. So that's very rewarding. But our work is quite different. I've learned a lot from her. I'm not going to admit that to her, of course, but and I think if she's smart, she's probably learned a bit from me too, The act of making tapestries, making drawings, making things, and the work that goes to galleries and museums and is likely to be around for a while after I'm dead and gone, is all right. That's fine, but it's not a big issue. I don't enjoy teaching quite so much as I used to, but I do feel that I've been lucky enough to store up a particular kind of odd knowledge, information, experience, and teaching, trying to pass that on quietly amongst the teaching that Susan and I do around the world, and see it becoming part of everyday life for some people. That's a very satisfying thing. You somehow fulfill a very ordinary role in life when you do that. Think of a carpenter who acquires enormous skill over 40, 50 years of working. That is part. I'm not at all secretive about anything I've discovered or relearned or invented. I'm all for sharing it because I've gained a lot from other people doing the same. And passing that on, I think, is probably the more important thing. There's nothing earth-shattering more than that, I don't think. And we're looking at your initials, GM, right? If we just, how many ways can we write GM? Both linear, right? We could look at it as a shape. A block letter. Is it still a G? Yeah. Mm-hmm. We could look at it as a solid shape. It's maybe even possible to make that a G. Maybe. There needs a little nick in there probably to be a G. This here. around, make it square there, and even just get a little slit in there. Now, I think that's probably the simplest there. It's fairly square and curved there like that. There's something sneaky and subversive about setting up a way of doing something that 50 years, 100, 150 years down the road, people adopted it, it becomes the way, and nobody quite knows where it was picked up. But to know that you might have set that up in your time is sneakily attractive, I think, more than any kind of fame. If you just turn perhaps at the moment and look at the far end, right, the tapestry away along there, because it's designed to be seen, set first of all at a distance. It's an American sailor. He's a detail of a photograph taken in 1942 in Pearl Harbor on Hawaii of a group of young Americans being shipped off to the Pacific through the war. And this was just one little head about, the photograph, it was about 1/4 of an inch square in the thing that I used. The idea was that these people went off to war, and who came back and who didn't. This was exactly 50 years later I was working on it, 1942 to 1992. And I decided to take one of these. I was doing another project, a mosaic project, quite different, from old press photographs. And I decided to take one of these sailors, soldiers, and make him permanent. The idea that he may or may not have come back. He doesn't know that he's been made permanent, if he's still alive, if he came back. But they were very innocent-looking people just going off, not knowing what the war was about. And as I say, it was about 1/4 of an inch square. So all that I did was take that original photograph and Xerox, photocopy it up and up, reduce it and photocopy it up again. And the more you do that, things start to happen. It was black and white. So it's a kind of memorial to people who go to war, really. The two ladies on the left are rather the same. Done at the same time, more or less, a little later. I just like them because they're unknown ladies in a photograph in Hawaii, afternoon tea and on the lawn, and they were getting a group photograph taken. The idea of making them permanent, 1932 they're from, and a little bit of weaving. Nothing special, just an idea that I wanted to deal with them and see. Originally I was going to do the whole figure, standing figures of both of them, but I cut them down.